What's up, everybody? It's wabaRaw, and I want to give you some of my thoughts on the upcoming subclasses in the Path of Exile expansion Ascendancy. We're going to have a total of 19 subclasses, 3 for each class, 1 for the Scion, except for the Scion, which will have 1. And you will get Ascendancy passive points after completing Azaro's Labyrinth in each difficulty in the game. And here we have the Inquisitor. Oh yeah, the Inquisitor, the one that so many people are so hyped about, the one that I am extremely hyped about. I'm going to try to go through this as unbiased as possible, but I'll probably fail. So we're going to be starting with Sanctify. Sanctify gives you 20% chance to create consecrated ground on kill, and a 20% chance to create consecrated ground when hit, each of which will last 3 seconds. Now, consecrated ground is a healing effect that we have in the game. It's not used very often. It is attached to this one? Yeah, I believe it's this one. Yeah, there we go. All right, so consecrated ground does exist in the game already. It exists on the Zondethist Kasich Sage Robe. 100% chance on block to create consecrated ground. This chest piece is pretty interesting, but it's not really used that often. And if we go to consecrated ground, we can see that consecrated ground is a beneficial ground effect that provides additional life regeneration. Back to Sanctity or Sanctify. This seems pretty cool, but unless the life regeneration of this is pretty high, it seems kind of pointless. For 2 points. For 2 points, it kind of seems pointless. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is Pious Path. Pious Path gives you 30% increased damage while on consecrated ground, and 50% reduced mana cost while on consecrated ground, and immune to elemental status ailments while on consecrated ground. Now, the immunity to status ailments, elemental status ailments, that's pretty strong. And honestly, both of those other modifiers are really strong too. But in Path of Exile, you're moving quite a bit. So, and then with the way Path of Exile is right now, in the current meta, you generally kill large packs at once. So you kill a large pack and you move to another one. This would be better if Path of Exile was dominated by single target abilities, right? But as of right now, you kill large packs and you move to other ones. So yeah, you might get consecrated ground, but then you will then move. Depending on how big the area of effect is for consecrated ground, I haven't actually seen it, but you'll then move and you will lose the benefit of the consecrated ground. While 30% increased damage and 50% reduced mana cost, those are pretty substantial. Those are pretty damn good. And immune status, elemental status ailments is also very good, but this is very interesting for Path of Exile. Like the idea of this support healer, someone that's putting these ground effects on that benefit you rather than hurt you, because most of the ground effects that we have actually do hurt you. Desecrated ground, burning ground, chilled ground, shocking ground. I'm still a little sick, I apologize. But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting, and if we could rely on it, that would actually be pretty cool. I think for this to be pretty good, it would have to maybe instead of it just putting consecrated ground on kill, but then or instead of it granting you consecrated ground, it gives you a consecrated aura or something where you have that aura around you afterwards. But that's like above. That's something completely different. So this is pretty cool, but we'll see. We'll see how it fits into the game. Next, we have Instruments of Virtue. Now, Instruments of Virtue gives you 20% increased spell damage for 4 seconds when you cast a spell, 40% increased attack damage for 4 seconds when you cast a spell, and then 10% increased attack speed for 4 seconds when you attack, and 20% increased cast speed for 4 seconds when you attack. Now, one, does this stack? Probably not. But if it does, one of the cool things about this is that you could definitely use this with something like a Fortify Whirling Blade setup to get cast speed for a caster. the attack speed and the attack damage is pretty cool. Well, the attack speed is solid. Like it's either you're going to trigger one of these effects a lot, and if like as a caster, are you using Whirling Blades? Then you could get the attack portion of this. Then you could get the cast speed portion of this, and also not to mention that attack speed, being granted attack speed is also good for Whirling Blades. But as a melee character or a non-spell user, there aren't too many spells that you actively cast. So I think this is a lot better in the department for spellcasters. Maybe we might be able to start seeing some builds. Actually, an example of a build that would be able to use this would be would a Mjolnir, would Discharge work? Cast on crit discharge? I don't think you actually cast that spell. If cast on crit and cast on damage taken setups work for Instruments of Virtue, I see this being really strong. But this is actually, otherwise, it's still pretty good, especially for a caster that's using Whirling Blades and Fortify. So, pretty cool Instruments of Virtue. Look forward to seeing that. And again, the fact that if you're using Whirling Blades, you benefit from attack speed as well. But now we're going to move on to the big boys of the Inquisitor passive tree. And first, let's just go to Auggury of Penitence. Penitence. I believe that's how you say it. I know it's Auggury, but I don't know if it's Penitence. I'm sure it is. Nearby enemies deal 5% less elemental damage. That's good. That's really good. Because I'm pretty sure this affects their elemental damage well before your resist affects it. So this is actually very, very strong. Nearby enemies dealing 5% less elemental damage. And keep in mind, it's like any enemy that is in the nearby range, which I think we should get some clarification on what actually classifies nearby. But nearby enemies deal 5% less elemental damage, and nearby enemies take 10% increased elemental damage. Now, how about this? The thing about this part is, does it work like Shock Ground? And there's some, and I'm not entirely sure of this. Maybe someone could clear this up in the comments and how this works. But even though let's just use Shock Ground as an example. Even though Shock Ground says, this mob takes 50% increased damage, I believe it acts as a more multiplier. That's one of the reasons why Abyssus makes you hurt so much. You think, oh, well, I take 40% increased physical damage. That's not too big of a deal. But that's 40% increased damage on top of everything else. So it acts as a more multiplier. This is a little confusing in Path of Exile because we have increases and reductions, and we have more modifiers and less modifiers. So because of the wording on this, and nearby enemies deal 5% less elemental damage, and nearby enemies take 10% increased elemental damage, I imagine that it is essentially 10% more elemental damage. I'm not sure, but this is really good otherwise. Just defensively, it's good on its own. If this just had nearby enemies deal 5% less elemental damage and nothing else, this would be good. But the extra side effect to this is, nearby enemies take 10% increased elemental damage. So this is a very good node. This is definitely a node that's going to be grabbed for Inquisitor a lot. Assuming that Inquisitor is not absolutely nerfed, which it very well may be incredibly and absolutely nerfed when we get to the next ones. So, the next one we have is Righteous Providence. 100% increased critical strike chance against enemies that are affected by no elemental status ailments. The first time you cast Stormcall. Since that enemy will not have any status ailments on it, it's going to have 100% increased chance to crit. And that crit will remain until it has a status ailment via you do crit or you just have a chance to shock, right? But then here's the second part of this. 30% increased critical strike multiplier against enemies that are affected by elemental status ailments. So this means as soon as you crit, as soon as you get that status ailment up on there, this switches from 100% increased critical strike damage into 30% crit multi. And 30% crit multi is a lot of damage. And for most crit builds, you won't really need this 100% increased critical strike chance, and you're going to be wanting more crit multi. This is a great way to boost your damage as soon as they have those status ailments on them. So this passive feeds into itself. You get more crit, so you could shock, or so you could ignite, or so you could freeze. And then once you do that, the crit changes into multiplier. So this is very, very good. Okay. Righteous Providence, really strong. Now, but this isn't it. This isn't the thing that is the most crazy about Inquisitor. The next one, and the final one that we're going to be talking about, the one that so many people are hoping either stays or changes, because there are definitely a lot of people who are like, change that now, that's way overpowered, is Inevitable Judgment. Critical strikes ignore enemy elemental resistances. Ignore enemy elemental resistances. That's insane. But, okay, so next up, non-critical strikes penetrate 10% enemy elemental resistance. So again, we have this, if it does this, if I crit, I get this. If I don't, I get this. That's the same thing. That's actually a really nice, a nice addition to the passives that we have in Path of Exile, because a lot of the passives in the tree, like Pain Attunement, for example, it's like 30% more damage when on low life. So you could only really take that. You only take that passive when you are low life. You don't take that passive, for the random occasion you are low life. When you do get hit and you are on low life, you only take it when you are low life. So having these, I don't want to say reverse, but opposite of bonuses or opposite attributes on these passives is fantastic. It's a great addition to Path of Exile. And it really fits into the whole Ascendancy passive tree style, in all honesty, because Ascendancy is like, Ascendancy means to achieve like a great deal of power. You're like reaching a new level of power. And these passives, especially the one in Inquisitor, is between Inevitable Judgment, Righteous Providence, and Auggury of Penitence, they're insanely strong, and they're very, very good. So, and you might ask, what's the downside, or what are the opposites on Auggury of Penitence? Well, not everything deals elemental damage, and also you don't always deal elemental damage. So this passive is literally good for anybody, assuming you're in a Templar Inquisitor. But let's go ahead and go back to Inevitable Judgment. So these are my thoughts on Inevitable Judgment. I love Inevitable Judgment, but that is insane. Ignores enemy elemental resistances. That is so much. So does this mean that whenever you crit, it's like mobs are going to have 0 elemental resistances? Or is this supposed to ignore additional elemental resistances? It doesn't say it in here, but we all know that the wording on passives and in tooltips does not always reflect what it actually does. See armor and damage reduction. But so, and I have there, in my opinion, there are 3 outcomes for this. One, the absolutely batshit insane, crazy, OP version of Inevitable Judgment is that critical strikes will deal damage based off enemies having 0 elemental resistances. That's absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. Okay, that's the most OP version of this. The second one is critical strikes ignore enemy elemental resistances, as in it ignores additional resistances. So we have the map mods that's like 40%, increased fire damage. We have the modifier on rares, it's like Blessing of Elements. We have modifiers on bosses that's like increased elemental resistances, etc., etc. Maybe this just ignores those and leaves it to their base resistances, or their base mob resistance type. Yeah, their base resistance for their mob type. Or, and this is the third thing, with Ascendancy, we're going to have a lot of changes coming to a Path of Exile. We're going to have changes to the tree. And I'm assuming we're going to have some rebalances to the game just in general, especially to a lot of the mobs. It is very possible that they rework resistances for mobs. They might rework resistances to mobs. They might make it to where, while you see this and you're like, oh, well, something that's 75 resistances, it now has, 0 resistance. Well, what if they rework it to where mob resistances aren't on a scale of 0 to 75 anymore, or 0 to 100, but they're like 0 to 50 or something like that. And they rebalance the entire game around it. Because this is absolutely insane. And I'm sure over at Grinding Gear Games, I'm sure they're very well aware how penetration works and how penetration is like a more multiplier. Like just 10%, just 10% penetration is really strong. So I could see maybe them reworking elemental penetration, and in addition to this, because this is really, really strong. This is insane. So those are the 3 outcomes. Either one, it's absolutely insane and we're going to have it nerfed so fast, or it's going to stay in the game. That's the one option. 2, the second option is it just ignores additional resistances. Or the third option being they're going to rework resistances in the game as is. So this isn't, while this will still be strong, it won't be as strong. So, yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Because Inevitable Judgment, a lot of people are really hyped for this. A lot of people are immediately saying that this should be nerfed. And in all fairness, this looks ridiculous. This looks like possibly one of the top 3. I want to say the best, but I want to give the other Ascendancy passives credit, especially the ones in the Witch Tree. But I think this is definitely like one of the top 3 most overpowered Ascendancy passives we have in the game that we know of right now. We have a lot more classes coming out that we haven't seen, and I really hope we get to see them soon. And GGG, please update your website so I could view this tree on the Path of Exile website, not on dumb Yahoo or IGN or whatever. Like, I have to crop it and it looks weird and it's annoying. I would rather just be able to see the actual passives, but maybe that means that it's not finalized. So I don't know. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Tell me what you think of Inevitable Judgment. Let's talk about Consecrated Ground, because I think Consecrated Ground is really interesting, and Pious Path is definitely really cool. It would be nice to see, that healer melee type character, but it's a far shot to see those, especially when we have things like Inevitable Judgment and Auggury of Penitence. Like, these are insane, and I want them. I want these. This makes wearing no pants worth it. And although I know people have been like, oh, well, the Templar is wearing pants in this artwork, newsflash, guys, that model in the game always has pants on. If you go put on that model of the ringmail, I forgot what ringmail it is, but you have pants on. So yeah, Templar still overall doesn't have pants. But yeah, again, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. You could tweet at me at wabaRaw on Twitter, obviously. And you can also catch me live on my stream at twitch.tv/wabaRaw. Please subscribe for future Path of Exile content. I have some exciting, cool videos coming up for Path of Exile. I'm just like kind of sitting on some ideas. And as soon as we start to see more stuff for Path of Exile and the updates with Ascendancy and Talisman League, I'm going to be pushing forward with them. So again, thank you guys. Comment below, follow me, like, subscribe, whatever. Have a good one. See you later.